validates God's stated goal in all that he was going to do. He says in verse 11, "Now I know that the Lord is greater than all gods, because in this affair they dealt arrogantly with the people." And Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, brought a burnt offering and sacrifices to God, and Aaron came with all the elders of Israel to eat bread with Moses' father-in-law before God. So, Jethro, who had been hitherto called a priest, the priest of Midian, whether he believed God or not, this seems to be a paradigm shift. And it seems to indicate that at this point, Jethro recognized the supremacy and the exclusivity of Jehovah, God Jehovah. And he brings him a burnt offering. So let's pick up in verse 13. The next day, Moses sat to judge the people, and the people stood around Moses from morning till evening. When Moses' father-in-law saw all that he was doing for the people, he said, "What is this that you are doing for the people? Why do you sit alone and all the people stand around you from morning till evening?" And Moses said to his father-in-law, "Because the people come to me to inquire of God. When they have a dispute, they come to me. I decide between one person and another, and I make them known the statutes of God and his laws." Moses' father-in-law said to him, "What you are doing is not good. You and the people with you will certainly wear yourselves out, for the thing is too heavy for you. You are not able to do it alone. Now obey my voice. I will give you advice, and God be with you. You shall represent the people before God and bring their cases to God, and you shall warn them about the statutes and the laws and make them known, the way in which they must walk and what they must do. Moreover, look for able men from all the people, men who fear God, who are trustworthy and hate a bribe. And place such men over the people as chiefs of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, and of tens. And let them judge the people at all times. Every great matter they shall bring to you, but any small matter they shall decide themselves. So it will be easier for you, and they will bear the burden with you. If you do this, God will direct you, and you will be able to endure. All this people also will go to their place in peace." So Moses listened to the voice of his father-in-law and did all that he had said. Moses chose able men out of all Israel and made them heads over the people, chiefs of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, and tens. And they judged the people at all times. Any hard case they brought to Moses, but any small matter they decided among themselves. Then Moses let his father depart in peace, and he went away to his own country. What do you think? It's pretty good advice, wasn't it? I mean, and so just as a review, what happened previous to this? At the end of chapter 7, the second half of chapter 17. Right. Yeah. So the groundwork was kind of laid for this advice divinely. I mean, this was not just coming out of the blue and Moses was like, "Whoa, wait, I can't do this by myself." God had worked with him through the battle of against the Amalekites, and it wasn't just the people holding up his hands either, were they? I mean, also there was Joshua down on the plains leading the men in battle, and so Moses was getting up there at this point. Probably not at the age where he should be leading a battle from the front. And yeah, so he'd had this real physical, dramatic teaching on this, and then his father-in-law shows up and says, "Hey, you need even more help." And it's just good advice, really. I mean, this is one of those passages. This is just really good advice. Hmm. Yeah.
And it's kind of secondary. This has primary purposes here, for sure. But it brings forth a problem. We see the problem is clear. Moses is getting more out.
Yeah.
I mean, from back there, even into this, even to the point where he's warned. And so that is the life of many pastors. They come to a point where they just can't do it anymore. They either go away, or they get encouragement and help from somebody from around them to say, hey, listen, we need help.
Yeah.
We need somebody to do these things. Or you maybe need to drop a few things. You know, that's a common problem in every church. But I see this here as a visual to the future in elders versus secretary.
Yeah, and there's a key that makes this work. There's a key that makes this work, and I think it also speaks to one of the purposes of this. There's a couple tie-ins here, so I'm kind of trying to decide which way I want to go here first. But what is going to be their guiding principle? How is Moses going to instruct the people that he is choosing as leaders? What is going to be their guiding light? Right. So, a couple things are happening here. One, they're establishing a need for a standard, and we're decentralizing Moses. He's not going to instruct them. I don't think this is a minor point. I think this is worth thinking on. He's not going to instruct them based on my experience, we should do this. My wisdom, well, what's worked for me these past 3 months, or it's God's law. And so he's deputizing all these people, and it's the authority is going back to God ultimately, not Moses. So suddenly we have a power structure that can actually do without Moses. It's not about Moses and what he says. But immediately, do you see a problem here, though? They don't have it yet. Yeah, that comes next. At first, I read this, and I kept reading this, and I'm like, well, maybe this is one of those examples where this is out of order, right? Like maybe he wrote this, but this actually happened after chapter 19. But it's not the case. Just as Moses on the mountaintop having his arms held up was preparatory to the advice from Jethro, this is absolutely preparatory to coming to the mountain and receiving the law. We're immediately confronted with, okay, if you're going to deputize all these people and instruct them in God's law, we need God's law and statutes. And the people, now let's just think, what if God had already given Moses the law and the statutes in some quiet secret meeting on the way? Could you see any problems with that? Like, I secretly found these golden tablets. No one could see them. I saw them. Take my word for it. You know? Hey, there you go. Yeah. So, and of course, God, all knowing, all wise, he's 12 steps ahead of the people of Israel here. He knows what they need. And so we've recognized that we need the law suddenly. We've recognized that we need instruction. We need some more information here. And everyone needs to agree on where the information came from. It needs to be irrefutable. So the groundwork is being laid here. We've identified the need. Thoughts, comments, concerns? Yes.
Employed in different ways, but at the end of the day, we all need the same resource.
Mm.
Fast forward, they all have the same resource. We're operating from the same time. We're not. It's not a one-man show.
Yeah.
Can't be.
Going back to the mountain, the mountain of battle, do you see any parallels between that and Jesus, or contrast between that and Jesus in the garden? Actually, the mountain, the battle of against the Amalekites, just a minor point I want to make.
Are you speaking in terms of Moses being a type of Christ?
Right.
Bringing an application in that?
Yeah.
Okay. Ask the question again.
So picture Moses on the mountain with his two helpers, his watchmen, if you will, rushing to his aid to bring his arms up as he petitions the Lord for the battle that is happening. Now picture Christ going to the garden with his chosen disciples. They did not do that. They failed him. Did Christ, like Moses, absolutely need them to uphold him? We have a better Moses in the garden, don't we? Just a minor point I wanted that's kind of been ringing out with me is that you almost see a better Moses. Christ was a better Moses before the coming battle. Yeah. It gives me chills. There's going to be a couple more little glimpses here. It's exciting. So, yeah. And also, it draws my mind to the Mount of Transfiguration, right? Yeah. And I keep going back to this. Who was one of the people that Christ was being ministered to by and talked to? This? Do you think they looked at each other and said, man, we really got to think about mountains, don't we? It's just fun. There's no huge, deep spiritual point there for me. It's just fun and beautiful and consistent. And I love it. So, I think it might have. I go back to Liz. I go back to your dad's words. He said several times. Those boys were good Jewish boys, and they knew the Old Testament. And I think those connections are probably a lot more real than they were. I have to kind of go scratching for those. Yeah. I got another one for you when we start reading. So just buckle up.
I like the idea that it seems that the main point of this passage is perhaps preparatory for sign.
Yeah.
On the leadership principle of reminded too that when you're in that situation, it's not quite so clear. And what I mean by that is that I find that a lot of times Scripture has multiple principles that at any given time they pull you in different directions. Now, another very classic story about Moses and leadership is that when he said, "I'm not good enough," and God said, "I got you." I mean,
Yes.
and in the moment, sometimes God calls you, "You can do it.
Yep.
I will help you." And sometimes the answer is, "You can't do it. You need some help."
Right.
And a lot of life is like, wait, which is it? Which guides me?
Yeah.
And there's no answer other than like wrestling through in the moment through prayer and God guides you eventually. But it feels noteworthy to note that the answer to every problem is not always His helpers.
Right.
Sometimes the answer is God will equip you.
Yep. He'll either equip you with helpers or it will be something else. Yeah.
But in the moment, sometimes you don't know which way you're supposed to go.
Yeah.
Is God calling you to just suck it up till be enough? Or is He saying, you need to pull some other people aside you? And it can be either.
Yeah.
And both are true. It's just the application in each given situation. Sometimes
And it's helpful for Moses that God kind of took him on a path in this case. Unlike when he was just pulled out of the desert where he was watching the sheep and God said, go. He'd had the battle against the Amalekites, and now Jethro kind of reinforces what God had taught him, and he's like, all right, I need to deputize. So that was helpful. Yes.
There's another little background story here that move right along with this, coming off what Scott just mentioned, and that Joshua
Yeah.
was told, be strong and courageous, do not be terrified, the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Several times. Not because he was being reminded to be strong and courageous, because he wasn't strong and courageous.
Yeah.
God came to Joshua in that way. And so we've got this man who's moving along with Moses, and like you say, when we get to the mountain, that's kind of an amazing thing. I think there's good evidence that Joshua was going to.
I think so. You had, I thought, yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate all this. When I think about this idea of knowing when to need help and when we don't need help, I tend to think about it from a Western point of view where pretty much everything is individual.
Oh, yeah.
But I think the New Testament lays out the Christian life so that almost nothing is individual until you get to something where really nobody can help you with this.
Yeah.
Walk forward. And that's, trying to flip that script in my mind has helped me with some things because I'm meant to share pretty much everything in my life with at least somebody else. It's not just my wife, close to me as well. And every once in a while, God brings you to something where it's like, you need the help, but you got to go about 2 steps further than anybody else around you can go with you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost like the baseline is we need to do this together. Yeah. All right. So, could I get somebody to read chapter 19, verses 1 through 6?
We're running out of time, so I'll do that.
What's that?
We're running out of time, so I'll do that.
Okay.
On the third new moon, chapter 19 of Exodus, right?
Mm-hmm.
On the third new moon, after the people of Israel had gone out of the land of Egypt, on that day they came into the wilderness of Sinai. They set out from freedom and came into the wilderness of Sinai, and they encamped in the wilderness. There Israel encamped before the mountain, while Moses went up to God. The Lord called to him out of the mountain, saying, thus you shall say to the house of Jacob, and tell the people of Israel, you yourselves have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings, and brought you to myself. Now therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession among all peoples, for all the earth is mine, and you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the people of Israel.
And I'll just read the next couple verses, and then we'll talk a little bit. So Moses came and called the elders of the people and set before them all these words that the Lord commanded him. All the people answered together and said, "All that the Lord has spoken, we will do." And Moses reported the words of the people to the Lord. And the Lord said to Moses, "Behold, I am coming to you in a thick cloud, that the people may hear when I speak with you, and may also believe you forever." Wow. So, how does God describe Israel's journey? That's pretty wild, isn't it? Carry them. So this is how God is describing what they went through with the trials and tribulations of dealing with Pharaoh, the 10 judgments laid against them, the 10 plagues, the flight from Egypt, the pursuit by Egypt, the defeat of Egypt, the attack by the Amalekites, and the miraculous victory against them, and the provision of manna and water from a rock. He says, "I carried you on eagle's wings. I bore you on eagle's wings." And in there is, what was his purpose in saving the people of Israel? What was his stated purpose? To bring them to himself. Right. So his goal was not to save them and then release them to their own devices. Because we already saw shades of this. Where would the people of Egypt wound up the first time they ran into trouble if they were left to their own devices? They said as much. Right back in Egypt. Oh, that we were lounging by the mead pots. Yeah. But no, God saved them to bring them to himself. And his plan for them is what? What's his plan? Stated in verse 6.
You shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation.
Right. So what does a priest do? What is the function of a priest? To speak on behalf of people to who? To God. Right. And then what does holy mean? Set apart. So God is setting apart this people who will go to God for the people. And so he's setting Israel apart to represent God to the world. You are a whole nation. And notice he uses a familial name and a national name for these people. First, he starts out with the house of Jacob, so descendants of Jacob. And then he uses Jacob's, you could almost call it his sanctified name, Israel. And we get the notion of a nation here. So he moves them from, these are the same people, Abraham's descendants. And this covenant really is a continuation of the Abrahamic covenant. And it is, if you obey my words, it's good. Obey my words. God's first words to Abraham were, depart this land and go to a land I will show you. And God told Abraham, if you obey my words, you will be blessed. And so he tells the people of Israel, obey my words. It's going to go well. You will be a people set apart. And how do the people respond? How do the people respond in verse 8? Sounds good. We'll do it all. Don't mean any disrespect, but they have no idea what they're signing up for. Yeah, amen. And we know now from our, from 2024, looking backward, we know that none of them and none of us are going to be able to keep all that God commands. And so all of this, so if the battle of the Amalekites was preparatory to Jethro's advice, and then the institution of Jethro's advice was preparatory to identifying the need for a law, for rules, for statutes, could this be preparatory as well? Haven't gotten into the laws yet, but this could be preparatory for something as well. Let's keep reading. When Moses told the words of the people to the Lord said to Moses, "Go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow, and let them wash their garments and be ready for the third day. For on the third day the Lord will come down on Mount Sinai in sight of all the people. And you shall set limits for the people all around, saying, 'Take care not to go up into the mountain or touch the edge of it. Whoever touches the mountain shall be put to death. No hand shall touch him, but he shall be stoned or shot. Whether beast or man, he shall not live. When the trumpet shall sound a long blast, they shall come up to the mountain.' So Moses went down from the mountain, to the people, and consecrated the people, and they washed their garments. And he said to the people, 'Be ready for the third day, and do not go near a woman.' On the morning of the third day, there was thunders and lightnings and a thick cloud on the mountain and a very loud trumpet blast, so that all the people in the camp trembled. Then Moses brought the people out of the camp to meet God, and they took their stand at the foot of the mountain. Now Mount Sinai was wrapped in smoke because the Lord had descended on it in fire. The smoke of it went up like the smoke of a kiln, and the whole mountain trembled greatly. And as the sound of the trumpet grew louder and louder, Moses spoke, and God answered him in thunder. The Lord came down on Mount Sinai to the top of the mountain. And the Lord called Moses to the top of the mountain, and Moses went up. We'll stop there for today. What do you guys see in there? What's jumped out at you? Just a mountain erupting. That's what we're told. Yeah. So it's not. The scholars have worked very hard to try to place this incident way farther north, where they believe that there was seismic activity during this period of time. It doesn't work with the rest of the narrative, and of course, there's no evidence of volcanic activity in that period of time, which would be necessary for fire and smoke. And so this was in southern end of the peninsula. So just a couple points here. One, the people cannot come into God's presence as they are, right? We know that. They need to get themselves clean. We're taught that, right. And so, right. And they would have had some understanding of this, albeit dim and kind of twisted, through the Egyptians. And the Egyptians, as we talked about, believed that cleanliness was next to godliness, and they were obsessive about cleanliness. And so the Israelites would have understood that to be in the holy presence, to commune with gods, one needs to be clean. But the next line, the imposition against relations, would have been markedly different than Egyptians and many of the Semitic cultures. And in fact, pretty much all of the known religions of that area. These were not an aesthetic people. They believed that that was very much a part of worship, and it was a very debased thing. But God is making it very clear, and he's drawing a very stark line that I am holy. I am supernatural. This is not going to involve any of this. This is a sanctified occasion. And then we are out of time. So, did you guys notice? In verse 10, the Lord said to Moses, "Go to the people, consecrate themselves today and tomorrow, and let them wash their garments and be ready for the third day." I mean, did that strike a chord with any of you? I hope so. So let's dwell on that this next week, and let's pick up there next Sunday. So, all right. Thanks, guys.